Christmas, the season of gift giving and good tidings. It's also the season where Mariah Carey activates her infinite money glitch. You just have to love it, and I just have to make my own infinite money glitch. So here's how it all began. As the name implies, Christmas has ties with Jesus Christ. It's his birthday actually, or so they say. According to the Bible, Mary conceived Jesus by the Holy Spirit. Around the time when Jesus was born, Joseph took Mary back to his homeland of Bethlehem to be taxed according to a decree from Caesar Augustus. Seeing as there was no room for them in any inns, which was likely due to the amount of people that also traveled to get taxed, Mary had to give birth to Jesus in a manger. The next verse shares a detail that's very important to the discourse. When Jesus was born, shepherds were in the fields watching over their flock. This doesn't happen in the winter. Estimates based on this information and other factors put Jesus' birth in the fall of 4 BC. I actually looked into this so I could give you the facts and not have to tell you trust me bro, but the details were too complex for me to fit into the video without going over the place, so trust me bro. In the early years of Christianity, Jesus' birth wasn't celebrated, making Easter the main Christian holiday of the time. There was a strong opposition to celebrating the birthdays of martyrs, or Jesus for that matter. The elders believed their days of martyrdom should be honored instead, as this was their true date of birth. But in the 2nd century, Christians organically started celebrating the birth of Christ. And in 350 AD, December 25th was chosen as the official date of the celebration by Pope Julius I, the head of the Catholic Church. According to one theory, this was done to adopt and eventually replace the traditions of old religious holidays that took place during the winter solstice. The pre-Christian Germanic people, for example, celebrated Yule, a winter festival in recognition of the sun, from late December to early January. This celebration led to the modern English term Yule, which is now used as a synonym for Christmas. Likewise, Saturnalia, a celebration in honor of Saturn, the Roman god of agriculture, was held by the Romans in the week leading up to the winter solstice. During the celebrations, food and drink were in their numbers, and Roman social order was suspended. Slaves were given temporary freedom and treated as equals, and businesses and schools were closed so everyone could join in on the festivities. Setting the date of Jesus' birth around this time could have been the early church's way of convincing non-Christians that Christianity wasn't that different from their religions if they had one. The theory also suggests that the date selection was done to Christianize Dies Natalis Solis Invicti, the birthday of the invincible sun, which was a celebration in honor of Sol Invictus, the Roman god of the sun. The celebration had been held in Rome since 274 AD, and it had been celebrated on, you guessed it, the 25th of December. To be fair, you probably didn't guess that, but early Christians took Sol Invictus to be analogous to Jesus, making the connection between the birth of the sun and the birth of the sun, which could explain the specificity of the date. There's also the calculation theory, which uses the date of the Annunciation, March 25th, to calculate that Jesus, being born 9 months later, would have been born on the 25th of December, which could also explain the specificity of the date. By the 5th century, celebrating Christ's birth had spread to Egypt, then to England 2 centuries later. The word Christmas is a shortened form of Christmas, and it was first recorded as Christmas in 1038. Christ is from the Greek word Christos, which is a translation of the Hebrew word Moshiach, which means anointed, and Mass is from the Latin Missa, which means Mass, and was used to denote the celebration of the Eucharist. The Greek origins of the word is why Christmas is often shortened to Xmas, using the initial letter Chi from Christos. Seeing as the Bible doesn't point out the date of Christ's birth, Puritans, who were English Protestants that wanted to rid the Anglican Church of Catholic practices, strongly condemned the celebration of Christmas, considering it a Catholic invention and the trappings of the Popery. In 1645, Oliver Cromwell, a British soldier, took over England with his Puritan forces, leading to a cancellation of Christmas celebrations. 4 years later though, Charles II was made king by popular demand, and he brought back the holiday. The Pilgrims, who were English Puritans that migrated to Massachusetts in 1620, were firmer in their belief than Cromwell. In 1659, after gaining significant political power, they banned Christmas celebrations in Boston. In 1681, this ban was revoked by Sir Edmund Andros, who was the English governor of regions including Boston. But after the American Revolution, English customs, including Christmas, fell out of favor, and it took almost a century for it to fall back in favor, becoming an American holiday in 1870. A more recent cancellation of Christmas happened in 2023, when public Christmas celebrations were cancelled in Bethlehem, the city of Jesus' birth, by Palestinian leaders of various Christian denominations. They cited the Israel-Hamas war in their unanimous decision to cancel the celebrations, and as of 2024, there still isn't Christmas in Bethlehem. In the early 19th century, unemployment in America was high. This led to rioting by the lower classes on the upper classes during the Christmas season. Up until this point, the overall atmosphere of the holiday hadn't ever been a tame one. Since the inception of the holiday, Christmas celebrations were often in a raucous, carnival-like state, but this changed and it became a tamer, family-oriented celebration greatly due to the works of Washington Irving. In 1819, Irving began publishing the Sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon Gent, a collection of stories about the celebration of Christmas in an English manor house. In the book, a squire invites peasants to his home for the holidays. In contrast to the problems faced by the American society at the time, the two groups mingled effortlessly, inspiring Americans to do the same. Around this time, Charles Dickens published A Christmas Carol, which inspired a similar family orientation in England. The phrase Merry Christmas, which was prominently used in the tale, then got an increase in popularity and has now become the holiday's go-to greeting. Around this time, the first commercial Christmas card was introduced, and it was designed by John Calcott Huxley, an English artist, at the suggestion of Sir Henry Cole, an English art patron, and it was brought to America by Louis Sprang in 1875. A decade earlier, William Sand's Christmas Carols Ancient and Modern was published, marking the first appearance of many classic English carols like The First Noel and God Rest You Merry Gentlemen. Christmas carols were originally communal folk songs sung during celebrations, and they have often been based on medieval chord patterns, giving them their characteristic musical sound. Down the line, they were sung in churches, and their popularity increased after the Protestant Reformation as Martin Luther, the seminal figure of the Reformation, wrote carols, encouraged their use in worship, and influenced the practice of singing carols outside the church. One of the oldest Christian celebrations of Christmas is the viewing of the Nativity play, a reenactment of the birth of Jesus. The first of such plays took place in 1223 AD in Greccio, an Italian town, and it was assembled by Francis of Assisi outside of his church. Every year, the play became bigger and better, and people traveled from far and wide to see it. Such plays eventually spread throughout all of Europe, and it was later adopted by churches, schools, and theaters. As the holiday continued to grow, it continued to look to other cultures and traditions for improvements, leading to ideas such as decorating trees and giving gifts. The Christmas tree was widespread among German Lutherans by the 18th century, but it wasn't until the 19th century that the tree became deeply rooted in German tradition. The history of the tree, however, dates back to the 8th century. According to legend, after coming across a group of pagans worshipping Thor's oak, a sacred oak tree, Saint Boniface, an English monk, chopped it down. A small fir tree then sprouted from the roots of the oak, which he declared as a symbol of Christ, pointing to its triangular shape as a representation of the Trinity and its evergreen nature as a sign of eternal life. By the 19th century, the Christmas tree was introduced to England by German-born Prince Albert, the husband of Queen Victoria. This tree was decorated with ornaments such as toys, small gifts, and candles, and it rapidly grew in popularity. Christmas trees were introduced to America by German settlers in the 17th century, and like in England, they became popular in the 19th century. Production and sale of blown glass ornaments then began in the UK and US, and by the 1930s, the US began developing artificial Christmas trees. The practice of giving gifts during Christmas dates back to the 15th century, and by the 18th century, the practice was well established. It reminded Christians of God's gift of Jesus to mankind and the gift the Magi gave to Jesus. It may also have been inspired by the gift giving that happened during Saturnalia. When it comes to giving gifts, one name immediately comes to mind: Santa Claus. Mr. Claus is a big fat man who lives at the North Pole with his wife, Mrs. Claus, where he spends the year making toys with the help of his elves. He receives letters from children asking for Christmas gifts, and on Christmas Eve, he loads up his sleigh with the gifts and flies around the world with the help of his 9 reindeer, giving them to those who made it on the nice list. Originally, Santa had 8 reindeer. Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer, was a creation of Robert Orme, an American retailer who wrote about the reindeer to attract customers to the department store he worked at. The concept of Santa Claus was inspired by Saint Nicholas, a Greek bishop from the 4th century. Accompanied by helpers, he went about in a red bishop's attire inquiring about the behavior of children during the past year before deciding whether they deserved the gift or not. In the late 18th century, Dutch families in New York gathered to honor the death of Saint Nicholas, who they also called Santa Claus. This inspired Clement Clarke Moore to write the poem An Account of a Visit from Saint Nicholas, more commonly known by its first line, "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," which fictionalized Santa Claus as Santa Claus. The first widely known illustration of Santa Claus was created by Thomas Nast and was inspired by the descriptions from the poem. Santa's image then increased in popularity thanks to illustrations made by Haddon Sundblom for the Coca-Cola Company. In Christmas of 1914, there were a series of unofficial ceasefires along the Western Front of the First World War, the Christmas truce as it went on to be called. In the weeks leading up to Christmas, soldiers crossed trenches to exchange season's greetings with each other, and on Christmas Day, some even exchanged food and souvenirs, showing that there can be a glimmer of light in even the bleakest of moments. Around the world, Christmas isn't always celebrated on the 25th of December. Most of the world uses the Gregorian calendar, but some churches still use the Julian calendar, which is 13 days behind. So, technically, they celebrate Christmas on the 7th of January. Talk about being late to the party. Other changes to Christmas dates I found interesting were that following the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Ukraine officially moved its Christmas date from January 7th to December 25th to distance itself from the Russian Orthodox Church, which supported Russia's invasion. And in September 2024, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro moved Christmas celebrations in Venezuela from the 25th of December to the 1st of October because to him, it already felt like Christmas in September. Christmas also isn't celebrated the same way around the world. In India, the Christmas tree is sometimes replaced with a mango or banana tree, and in majority Muslim states such as Somalia, Christmas celebrations have been prohibited. Christmas is also the peak selling season for many retailers around the world. In the United States, calculations show that a quarter of all personal spending takes place during Christmas. Film studios also do their fair share of spending, releasing high-budget movies during the holiday season in hopes of getting more ticket sales, with many of them being centered around the holiday. Musicians do the same thing too, releasing holiday-centered songs, but most of the time, they don't get that sweet, sweet Mariah money. And that's all I have for you. I hope you have a wonderful holiday season, and I hope I get a taste of that Mariah bag. Merry Christmas, you filthy animals, and a Happy New Year.